All right, you seekers of electronic equipment. Yesterday, I showed you this power supply I built 50 years ago while I was working in the Radio Shack. I showed it to a bunch of people, and a bunch of people started building it. One guy got on the CB radio, talked to a guy. Well, anybody was great interest in it because way back 50 years ago, I don't even think Heathkit had something this small, this amount of range. Now, the only thing this supply wouldn't do back then is a lot of op-amp projects needed a dual supply. But this one here, you could use for TTL. You could power transistor radios with this while you were repairing them. Other experiments, you could do electroplating with this supply because it can stay on for a week straight. And it has. This supply has seen so many projects over the years because it's a variable supply. It's only 1 amp. But I started looking at different projects, and as electronics started evolving, they needed less and less current. And just before I worked part-time at the Radio Shack, RCA, it was tubes, but we had a bunch of HP, really nice HP solid state supplies. And the one guy on the other side in another building, he tried to run a 5-volt filament on DC. See, the government required 5 volts or 6 volts on the filament DC to get the life test. So this guy kept trying to hook the tubes up and he kept blowing it out. So they sent me over there because I was their solid state guy. And I went over there and the guy says to me, he goes, look, I'm using this supply is supposed to give me 5 amps, blah, blah. I looked at the guy and it's tubes. And I said, okay, the filament's 6 volts. Yeah. It's a giant frickin' tube. It's almost 1 foot big. And it's just a rectifier tube for a submarine to charge the batteries. I could talk about this now because I don't even think they use them anymore. Well, anyway, I looked at him. I said, what's the inrush current? What do you mean inrush current? We're in tubes, right? When the filament's cold and you put the voltage across it, how much does the filament pull before it reaches the 5 amps? It's going to pull more. And he's looking at me like I'm freaking crazy. And I'm saying to myself, this guy doesn't understand first day, first week of tubes. The filament is cold and it pulls more current until it warms up. As it warms up, it pulls less current. So I call over to the other building. I can't count on anybody in that building. I call over to my building and I get Ken Reco. And I said, Ken, I'm over here. And I said, this guy went through like 20 HP supplies trying to light 1 frickin' tube. And he keeps saying the supply is 1 amp. He also put bigger fuses in. So Ken looks it up, and I said, what's the inrush current on the filament? He says, it's 10 amps. I said, all right, thank you. So I went back, told the guy, and the guy's shaking his head. Remember I told you when people shake their head at me? So they sent me over there. I had carte blanche. I went through the HP supplies and how they were laid out. I had the schematic. And they ordered me some new transistors, and I put them in, and then I powered in the HP supply. It showed you how to parallel the supplies and the sense line and the whole thing. And it was sort of new to me, but I basically had an idea. I'm going to parallel a bunch of power supplies like you would with a battery, and it shows you if you do that, you bring the sense line out of the back of the power supply, and then there might have even been a resistor involved somewhere in it. Well, anyway. That was my experience. So I get laid off at RCA. I'm working part-time at Radio Shack. And I find this magazine. Now, here's the magazine. I'm going to do this a couple different ways. Now, what you're looking at is the front panel. And you can see it's on right now. I think it's around 12 volts. Indicator light. This is the on-off. This is between the meter switch between voltage, which is showing 12. When you go down, it would show 0. Because I don't have a load across the terminals. But here it goes. It's an Electronic Hobbyist, fall/winter 1975. And that's when I worked at Radio Shack. In 1975, during the CB radio craze. And a lot, like I told you with the last video, people, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? These guys are like, well, this thing won't power a CB radio. I said, that's correct. This is a CB radio. I think you needed 3 amps at 12 volts to run it legally. And they're like, I said, I'm not doing that. I said, this supply is for experiments, for other things. The whole world doesn't revolve around CB radio. But in 1975, it sort of did. All the lunkheads and the idiots thought they were great people because they installed a CB radio, and then they brought it to me to adjust the antenna, SWRs and all that stuff. A lot of them screwed up. But that's what a lot of people were getting into electronics only because they wanted a CB radio. But there were other people that wanted to do TTL projects and other things. All right. So anyway, a lot of people wanted this power supply just because they wanted to build something, and they wanted to build it their way, which was the lazy way. Now, I showed you yesterday. I have rub-on letters. You rub them on. When you see this original article, you can see why I changed a few things. I couldn't get that Darlington, so I used 3 separate. I thought they were. It keeps coming to me what those transistors are. They're 3055s, 2N3055. I think that's right, 2N3055s. There's 3 of them on the back. Now I showed you the front, and now we're gonna show you inside. And you go look for Electronic Hobbyist, Fall/Winter, 1975, page 73. I'm gonna do this so you get an idea, because there were guys coming from everywhere into the Radio Shack because they all knew what magazine I used, and then they were starting to run into some of the problems I was running into with the Darlington. Our local guy would not stock it, or he ran out of them, or I don't remember what it was. Or some guys wrote to the magazine to find out where they could get it. I think it might even tell you in the magazine. Somebody called it and they were out of them. But anyway, I switched it to 2N3055s, I think I said. And I used a driver to drive those 3 transistors that are on the back, and they're not on a heatsink. I thought I was thinking of another supply. But in other words, the guy who builds the article, he built everything inside this case. And I did the same thing. I think I did a little bit better job than he did. Now, I'm trying not to electrocute myself here because it is on. Let me unplug it. All right, we unplugged. We're safe now. You know, there is 125 volts in there. All right, let me get this lined up. I know some of you guys just like to look at stuff. And that's what these guys were coming. They were doing. They were coming to the store, and they had the article, and they're playing make-believe. You know, I didn't really understand that back then. There are people that play make-believe unbelievable. They go for weeks collecting the parts, and then it never gets built. Oh, let me get a little more light on the subject. No, less light, more light. See, the camera's got a light built into it. And this light here it is here. This light here puts out some infrared, and it messes the camera up. All right, let me make sure it's in focus. We're low enough to get the whole thing. All right, of course here, this is the meter. These are 2 resistors, and they're I believe they're 10 ohm, maybe 0.1 ohm. All right, I gotta get glasses. That's why everybody's like, "Wow, how'd you know to use this?" Okay, I went to school, and if I went and got a math certificate from a college, all right, they're 10 ohms. So they're in parallel, I believe, and the article called for a 5 ohm resistor, and I knew the Radio Shack had the 10s, and that's I just built. It's, well, how'd you know how to? I don't know. I went to tech school. You know, you can put 2 resistors in parallel. Right now, over down here, this is the driver transistor that drives these 3 transistors, and these have equalization resistors less than an ohm on the emitters. And what this does is this acts as the Darlington I couldn't get. All right, and once again, Electronic Hobbyist, Fall/Winter, 1975. All right, so this section here is in conjunction with the current pot. You'll see it in the diagram. All right, there's a couple different ways you can go on this thing if you decide to build yourself a power supply. And yes, you probably could buy a module on eBay. Now let me turn it down this way. We had that way enough time. But the people would come in the radio shack, and they would say to me, how did you know how to do this? How did you know how to do that? And you start explaining to them, and then you realize that they're not bringing anything to the party or to the project. You know, you have to, you know, and then the other ones, well, how did you cut the holes in the case? They don't even have a case yet. They don't have any of the parts. What they'll do is for 3 or 4 days, they'll come in the Radio Shack and ask a bunch of questions, climb up my ass, and then they don't come in anymore. And I sort of started figuring that out. You know, with that, I told you that guy Joe. You know, can you get mine working? He copied mine pretty good, and you know, I went and bought the parts. I drove all around. I spent my day driving around getting parts, putting them in there. I told him give me $6, and he thought that was too much money. And he did rear his ugly head again down in the electronic barn. I was there talking Herman, and he come in with 2 of his friends. See, he knew some electronics, and his friends are total morons. And then the guy, Herman, goes to me, that guy really screwed us up. He says, wait till he leaves, I'm going to tell you. I said, wait till he leaves, and I'll tell you the shit he did to me. But in other words, the guy leaves, and then Herman says, he was buying computers, hard drives, at the electronic barn, real cheap, and he was powering them up and reading whose stuff it was, and it was doctors, it was lawyers' stuff in there, and then he was calling them up and sort of like scaring them if they didn't give him so much money and buy the hard drive. Anyway, that's what he did, and I don't know if the FBI got involved with the electronic barn, but it became a big brouhaha, okay, as Herman would say, and I think at some point they banned the guy from coming into the electronics barn. But he didn't even look at me. He didn't even recognize me from Radio Shack. But he was still into his leading 2 other bozos around the electronic barn and showing them how much he had learned with what parts are and stuff like that. But what a nightmare. But you know, this is a pretty good first time project because there's some really good principles in there. I mean, you start off with, you know, have to have a nice size transformer. And the article says I think it says a 3, and this might only be a 2 or a 2.5. So you gotta kind of like, well, I can't get a 3, I'll use a 2.5. And my whole goal was to make a supply that was 1 amp to 20 volts, and it goes to 25. It's all calibrated, and other people they wanted something to build. And back then, believe it or not, crystal radios got laughed at. And that's because everybody was building the loop stick one with just the diode and the crappy little, it's not ceramic, it was a piezoelectric headphones. And it really wasn't that. It's got some type of Rochelle salts headphone, and they go bad after they sit there for a while. But in other words, nobody wanted to build a crystal radio set. Everybody was, and this was like the next step. This is why the guys talking on the CB radio, all of them wanted to suddenly know electronics. So someone mentioned they were building the supply, and the guy was at the Radio Shack, and then some of them were coming up in their trucks, and they wanted to see this thing. And then some of them actually looked at it and go, "That's beyond me." You know, you did a really nice job, and a lot of this has been pulled apart a few times in order to show somebody, so the wiring isn't as squared as it used to be. You know, I did electronic assembly for 3 years. This thing should be a lot neater than that, but wait till you see the article. Again, the article is from Electronic Hobbyist, Fall/Winter 1975, and it's in that history section of magazines up on the internet. You'll find it. If you put in Electronic Hobbyist, Fall/Winter 1975, it'll come up with this. And I'm also going to put the link in the comment area, so you can just click and go see it, download it. And some of you will just play make-believe with it. You know, you'll print out the page, and then you'll look at it, you'll put it in a drawer, and that's as far as it's going to go. But there were people that did finish it, and some of them needed help from me. And you know, they had wires in the wrong place. And you get lost in this thing. I mean, you got to. So I would tell them, wire the transformer, the full weight bridge, and the capacitor, the on-off switch, and the indicator light. Put that all in first. No, they tried to do the whole thing at once. Oh man. And back then I was younger. I had really good eyesight. I had really good patience. And I would stay on. I'd bring one home every night from the Radio Shack, go down in the cellar, and work on it. And my mother says, "What are you doing?" I said, "Yeah." And I said, I knew the person was never going to use it for anything, but it was bragging rights. Guys would come in the store, and one guy would be looking, and the other guy's bragging, "I got mine working." You didn't get it working. I got it working for you. But this is how it morphs, you know. Oh, it was nothing to it. Yeah, you got this guy behind the counter that got you the schematic or told you what the magazine was. Oh, I even told them in the store where they could get the magazine. It was really pathetic. And a lot of the guys got the magazine, and then the store didn't have the magazine anymore, so they would brag that they had the magazine. The other poor guy standing there, "I wish I could build that." And I think we had a copy machine at the bank, and the girl ran off some copies for us. And then there's guys that are never going to build it, but they want a free copy of the diagram. See, that's what I didn't understand about people. See, the free copy never seems to get to the guy that's actually going to build it. He's too late to the party, and you see it on his face. He's like, "Man, I'm always one step behind." That's what you feel like in life when you really finish stuff up. Other people like, "Oh, you didn't see that? They were selling them $10 each," or you're too busy helping people to follow along. There's other people that just go through life and they hit all the sales. When they walk in the store, the thing is on sale, and they grab them. They maybe grab 10 of them for bragging rights. The last thing I saw that was really annoyed me was for Christmas, Harbor Freight came out with a miniature toolbox, and the internet was covered with people. "I got 2 of them." I got, "Oh, you asshole." The thing really can't hold any tools. I looked for the review. The guy showed it. He says, "You really can't fit this in there. You can't." It was a miniaturized. Well, anyway, go look at that if you like annoyances. But I understand people now, and you got to watch what you say around them. "Well, I'd like one of those too. I would like one too." And then you give it to them. "Oh, I'm going to get to it. I'm going to get to it." The worst one ever was my father kept bugging me. He wanted to build an SCA adapter. An SCA allows you to pick up stations without commercials. They're on the same frequency as the station, and they're subcarriers. So I want to build that. I want to build it. "Can you etch that circuit board for me?" All right, so I etched the circuit board. He put 2 parts, and I drilled it out for him too. He put 2 parts in that circuit board, and that was it. That's as far as he went. All the work was done by me. And I kept saying, "What are you going to do with that?" "Oh, I'm going to get to that." Well, when he died, and I had to clean out his stuff, that circuit board, I took the 2 parts out. One was I remember it was a choke. It was a 2.5 millihenry. The one with it's really wound really cool. But in other words, he had that off of me, and then maybe 1 or 2 resistors off of me. He'd come in my workshop and go through the drawers, and then I could have got him all the parts, but he had lost interest because I wasn't doing it. If I had put the parts on and then wired it up, he would tell everybody I put an SCA decoder on my stereo, and now I don't have any commercials. And of course, "Could you build me one?" I was at a wedding, and I'm outside talking to my cousin. He just died, and he was a smart guy in electronics, like me. Anyway, we were talking about the decoders we built, and then the next day, my phone rings. It's one of my cousins. He listened in on our conversation, and he thought I was going to build him a decoder to get free movies. People are amazing, and I really understand it now. What people are like. People that tell you, "I'll be around Tuesday, and I'll take it," and then they never show up. I stopped. I don't really. What I do now is when someone says, "I'm going to be around Tuesday," and they don't show up, or if they do show up, I'm not there. "Oh, I forgot totally about it." I'm not. I spent so many times where I've waited for someone to show up to have me look at something, and then something better came along, so they didn't show up. So my day was waiting around. When are he's going to get here? See, we didn't have cell phones years ago. See, now you can call the guy on the cell phone, and if he doesn't answer it, that's it for him. Now, in the old days, you'd actually wait around for someone to show up with something. And then 4 or 5 weeks later, I forgot to come by. Yeah, well, I didn't forget to be there for you. And that's the attitude I have in me from all this nonsense. But yeah, there were people that wanted to build this power supply for whatever reason. It's a fantasy. It's like all the people that got the computers. I got the computer. When I finally spurged and bought one, I had to have a reason to buy it. And I used it for my magazine articles and drawing diagrams. And then later on, I sold booklets. My website, Crank Organ's still there. You could still, I think, no, maybe not. You can't see all the pages. I took the pages down because people kept begging me, I know you took the pages down, but I would really like to buy that booklet. And right there in the beginning, it says, I don't want to do this anymore. So I just have, it holds the space. And then I think there is a thing that explains if they want to contact me on crankorgan.com. I just can't believe what people are really like. There are some really nice people, but the majority are not nice. I think that's it. All right, that's it. Hold on, one more time. Electronic Hobbyist, Fall/Winter, 1975, page 73. All right, that's it.